Captain Zara Chen had been dismissed from 17 different command positions across the galaxy. Not for incompetence. Mind you, no. The problem was far worse in the eyes of her superior officers. She was average. Devastatingly, frustratingly, mind-numbingly average. At least, that's what they thought. Another human, Admiral Kresh muttered, his 6 eyes rolling in perfect synchronization as he reviewed her file on his holographic display. The Zentari commander's crystalline exoskeleton clicked disapprovingly. Terra produces nothing but mediocre soldiers. While the High Command insists on including these Deathworlders in our strategic core is beyond my comprehension. The other members of the Galactic Strategic Council nodded in agreement. Commander Vex, a towering Chronarian with skin like polished obsidian, let out a rumbling laugh. Have you seen her test scores? Merely adequate in every category. No exceptional tactical innovations. No breakthrough strategic insights. She's perfectly, boringly normal. Perhaps that's the point, whispered General THYSS. Her serpentine form coiled elegantly around her command chair. The Naga officer's forked tongue flicked out thoughtfully. Humans from Terra are known for their unpredictability. Admiral Kresh's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Unpredictability is not strategy, General. It's chaos poorly disguised as planning. What none of them knew, as they sat in their gleaming conference room aboard the flagship Eternal Glory, was that Zara Chen had been listening to every word to the ship's communication array. A simple trick she'd learned during her academy days. Something about rerouting auxiliary channels that her instructors had glossed over. Apparently, being average meant people stopped paying attention to what you might be capable of learning. Zara smiled grimly as she adjusted her earpiece, her fingers dancing across her personal data pad. These alien commanders had made their first mistake. They assumed that average meant predictable. They had no idea how wrong they were about to be. The emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the ship, their piercing wail echoing through the corridors like the screams of dying stars. Red warning lights bathed everything in an ominous crimson glow. Alert! Alert! Enemy fleet detected at Coordinate 77 Mark IV. Hostile ships numbering in the thousands. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. The voice of Lieutenant Jax crackled through the intercom system, barely concealing his panic. The young Terran communications officer had been one of the few people aboard who'd shown Zara any respect, probably because he was equally dismissed by the command structure. Admiral Kresh's 6 eyes widened in what could only be described as abject terror. "The Void Reapers," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the chaos erupting around them. "How did they find us here? This sector was supposed to be clean." Commander Vex was already pulling up tactical displays, his massive fingers working frantically across holographic interfaces. "Sir, preliminary scans show at least 3,000 enemy vessels. Dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, fighter swarms. They've got us completely surrounded." "Impossible," General THYSS hissed, her scales shifting from green to a sickly yellow. "Our intelligence network showed no Reaper activity in this quadrant for months." The view screen flickered to life, showing the approaching armada of enemy ships. They moved like a plague of metallic locusts, their dark hulls absorbing the light from nearby stars. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destructive engineering, bristling with weapons that could crack planets like eggs. Zara watched from her position at a secondary monitoring station, her expression carefully neutral. Inside, however, she was analyzing everything. The enemy formation patterns, their approach vectors, the way they coordinated their movements. What she saw made her want to laugh out loud. These supposedly terrifying Void Reapers were using textbook assault formations, strategies so old and predictable that they've been covered in first-year tactical courses at the Academy. The same Academy where she'd been labeled average for pointing out the obvious flaws in such approaches. "Damage assessment coming in," reported Commander Vex, his voice grim. "They're targeting our engine clusters first. Classic disable and destroy tactics. If they knock out our propulsion, we'll be sitting ducks." "Sir," Lieutenant Jax's voice crackled again. "The enemy commander is requesting communication. Should I put them through?" Admiral Kresh straightened his uniform, trying to project authority, despite the obvious fear in his multifaceted eyes. On screen, the view screen shifted to show the interior of a Reaper command bridge. The enemy commander was a nightmare made flesh, a cybernetic monstrosity with glowing red sensors where eyes should be. Half his face had been replaced with mechanical components, and cables snaked directly into his skull. "I am War Prime Brutus of the Void Reaper Fleet." The creature spoke, its voice a grinding mix of organic vocal cords and mechanical synthesizers. "You will surrender your ships and crews to be processed for integration into our collective. Resistance will result in unpleasant consequences." "We are a diplomatic mission," Admiral Kresh replied, his voice wavering slightly. "Under the Galactic Accords, civilian vessels are protected during." War Prime Brutus interrupted with a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so utterly devoid of humor. "Diplomatic mission? Your ship carries enough firepower to level a moon. Your crew includes some of the galaxy's most decorated military officers. Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" The connection ended abruptly, leaving the command crew staring at a blank screen. "Sir," Commander Vex said quietly, "they're beginning their attack run. We have perhaps 10 minutes before they're in optimal firing range." Admiral Kresh looked around desperately at his assembled officers. "Options? I need options, people. We could try to break through their perimeter," suggested General THYSS, though her tone indicated she didn't believe it would work. "Rush their weakest point and hope our shields hold long enough to reach hyperspace. With 3,000 ships, we'd be vaporized before we traveled 1,000 kilometers." Vex replied grimly. "Then we fight," Kresh declared, though his voice lacked conviction. "Send word to all ships. We'll make our stand here." That's when Zara Chen finally spoke up. She'd been silent through the entire crisis, content to observe and analyze. Now, with less than 10 minutes before certain destruction, she cleared her throat. "Excuse me, Admiral," she said politely, her voice cutting to the panic like a blade through silk. "I might have a suggestion." Every head in the command center turned toward her. The look of disbelief on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. "Captain Chen," Admiral Kresh said slowly, "I hardly think this is a time for—" "8 seconds," Zara interrupted, consulting her datapad. "That's how long it took me to identify 17 critical flaws in their attack formation. Would you like to hear them?" The command center fell completely silent, except for the steady beeping of various monitoring systems and the distant thrum of the ship's engines. Commander Vex was the first to recover his voice. "You're telling us that you, a human captain with no significant tactical achievements, have found weaknesses that our combined strategic analysis missed?" Zara shrugged, the gesture somehow managing to convey both humility and supreme confidence. "Well, when you put it like that, it does sound rather unlikely, doesn't it?" She moved to the central tactical display, her fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. The holographic representation of the enemy fleet appeared in three-dimensional detail, each ship marked with various tactical indicators. "You see, the problem with being labeled average is that people stop paying attention to what you're actually doing," she continued conversationally. "They assume you're not worth listening to. But what they don't realize is that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone's ignoring." General THYSS slithered closer, her serpentine eyes fixed on the display. "What exactly are you suggesting, Captain?" "I'm suggesting," Zara said with a smile that held absolutely no warmth, "that these Void Reapers are about to learn why Terra is called a death world, and why underestimating humans is the last mistake most people ever make." She highlighted specific sections of the enemy formation, her movements quick and precise. "Their flagship is positioned here, in the center of their battle line. Classic command and control setup. Take out the brain and the body dies. That's basic tactical knowledge," Admiral Kresh protested. "But their flagship is surrounded by layers of defensive screens. It would take our entire fleet to punch through, and we'd lose 90% of our ships in the process." "Would we?" Zara asked, her tone deceptively mild. "Or would we lose exactly 0 ships while watching their entire armada tear itself apart?" The silence that followed was profound, Even the background hum of the ship's system seemed to fade as every officer in the command center stared at the human captain, who had just claimed she could destroy 3,000 enemy vessels without losing a single friendly ship. "That's impossible," Commander Vex said flatly. "No tactical scenario exists where those odds make sense." Zara's smile widened, and for the first time, her fellow officers got a glimpse of something that made their blood run cold. Behind her average appearance, behind her unremarkable test scores and mundane service record, was something that had been forged in the crucible of humanity's most violent world. Something that had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. "Commander Vex," she said pleasantly, "you're about to discover that impossible is just another word for something no one's been creative enough to figure out yet." She turned back to the tactical display, her fingers moving with deadly precision as she began highlighting specific points in the enemy formation. Each mark she made pulse with a soft red light, creating a pattern that looked almost artistic in its complexity. "The Void Reapers pride themselves on coordination," she explained, her voice taking on the tone of a professor delivering a lecture. "Their entire tactical doctrine is based on synchronized movements and overlapping fields of fire. It's actually quite elegant, in a brutally efficient sort of way." "Then how do you propose to defeat it?" General THYSS asked, genuine curiosity replacing her earlier skepticism. "By using their greatest strength against them," Zara replied. "You see, the thing about perfect coordination is that it requires perfect communication. And the thing about perfect communication is that it creates a single point of failure." She gestured to the display, where her markings had begun to form a recognizable pattern. It looked like a spider's web, with threads of connection spreading out from central nodes throughout the enemy fleet. "Their command frequency operates on a quantum-entangled network," she continued. "Impossible to jam, impossible to intercept, and supposedly impossible to exploit. But there's one tiny flaw in their system, one little vulnerability that their engineers probably dismissed as statistically insignificant." Admiral Kresh leaned forward, his 6 eyes fixed on the display. "What kind of vulnerability?" "Resonance cascade failure," Zara said simply. "If you hit their communication array with exactly the right frequency at exactly the right moment, you don't just disrupt their network. You turn it into a weapon." The implications of what she was suggesting began to dawn on the assembled officers. Commander Vex Obsidian's skin actually paled, shifting from deep black to charcoal gray. "You're talking about turning their own communication system into a distributed explosive device," he whispered. That's diabolical." "That's human," Zara corrected gently. "We've been finding creative ways to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and supposedly smarter than us for our entire evolutionary history. It's what we do." She looked around the command center, meeting each officer's gaze in turn. "The question is, are you willing to let this average human save all your lives, or would you prefer die with your prejudices intact?" The battle klaxons chose that moment to shift from the general alert tone to the final warning signal. Less than 5 minutes until the enemy fleet reached optimal firing range. Admiral Kresh closed his 6 eyes, his crystalline exoskeleton clicking softly as he made his decision. When he opened them again, there was something new in his expression. Not quite respect, not yet, but a beginning of understanding. "Captain Chen," he said formally, "you have tactical command. What do you need?" Zara's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. "Just 3 things, Admiral: a communications array, a targeting computer, and about 30 seconds of everyone staying out of my way." She moved to the primary control station, her fingers already working across the interfaces with fluid precision. "Oh, and one more thing." "What's that?" General THYSS asked. "When this is over and we're all still alive, I want transfers for everyone who call me average to somewhere very, very far away. Preferably a system where the dominant species appreciates tactical brilliance when they see it." The countdown timer on the main display showed 4 minutes and 37 seconds until enemy weapons range. Zara Chen, the dismissed, underestimated, perfectly average human captain, cracked her knuckles and got to work. The 8-second revolution. The command center of the eternal glory had never been quieter. Every officer, Every technician, every person with a pulse held their breath as Captain Zara Chen's fingers danced across control interfaces with surgical precision. The countdown timer glowed malevolently above them. 3 minutes and 58 seconds until the Void Reaper fleet reached optimal firing range. Captain, Lieutenant Jax's voice crackled through the intercom, barely steady. I'm reading massive energy buildups across their entire fleet. Whatever you're planning, it better work fast. Zara didn't look up from her work. Her eyes were fixed on 3 separate displays simultaneously, each showing different aspects of the enemy fleet's communication network. To the untrained eye, it looked like incomprehensible streams of data. To her, it was a symphony waiting for the right conductor. Admiral Crash, she said calmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a laser through fog. I need you to target our main communications array at coordinate 77 Mark 4 Alpha. Do not fire. Just target. The Zentari commander's crystalline exoskeleton clicked nervously. Captain, that's empty space. There's nothing there. Trust me, Zara replied, her fingers never pausing in their deadly dance. There's something there. Something their sensors can't detect because they're not looking for it. Commander Vex leaned over her shoulder, his massive frame casting a shadow across her workstation. What exactly are you targeting? The ghosts in their machine, she said with a grin that would have made a shark proud. Every quantum entangled communication network has a central relay point, a single node that coordinates all the others. The Reapers hide it by making it completely invisible to conventional sensors. Then how did you find it? General THYSS asked, her serpentine form coiled tightly with anticipation. Because I'm not using conventional sensors. Zara laughed, and there was something genuinely joyful in the sound. I'm using something much more dangerous. Human intuition backed by Deathworld-level paranoia. The timer showed 3 minutes and 12 seconds. On the main view screen, the approaching Reaper fleet had begun to spread into their final attack formation. Each ship moved with mechanical precision, their dark hulls reflecting the light of distant stars like a swarm of deadly insects preparing to devour everything in their path. War Prime Brutus's voice crackled through the communication system one final time. Final warning. Galactic vessels. Surrender now, or face complete annihilation. You have 60 seconds to comply. Admiral Crash started to respond, but Zara held up one finger without looking away from her displays. Don't, she said simply. Let him think we're paralyzed with fear. It'll make what happens next so much more satisfying. She highlighted a section of code on her primary screen, her expression shifting from concentration to something that looked almost predatory. There, she whispered. Found you, you magnificent bastard. What is it? Commander Vex asked. The resonance frequency of their entire network, Zara explained, her voice taking on the tone of someone explaining a particularly elegant chess move. Every communication array, every targeting computer, every life support system in their fleet is synchronized to this exact quantum signature. She began entering a series of commands that made absolutely no sense to anyone watching. Her movements were fluid, almost artistic, like a pianist performing a complex sonata. The beautiful thing about quantum entanglement, she continued conversationally, is that it works both ways. They can send information through their network instantly, but that same network can carry other things, like, for example, a very specific type of feedback loop. General THYSS's scales rippled from yellow to deep orange. Feedback loop? Think of it as a virus, Zara said, her smile widening. But instead of infecting computers, it infects reality itself. The quantum field that holds their network together becomes unstable. And when quantum fields become unstable in the presence of concentrated dark matter, she gestured toward the enemy fleet, where each ship's hull was composed largely of dark matter composites for stealth purposes. Boom, she finished simply. The timer showed 1 minute and 43 seconds. Admiral Cresh's 6 eyes were wider than anyone had ever seen them. Captain, are you telling me you're going to make their entire fleet explode by sending them a message? Not a message, Zara corrected. A song. A very specific mathematical sequence that will cause their quantum communication field to resonate at exactly the wrong frequency. Their own stealth technology will do the rest. She paused in her work for just a moment. looking around at the assembled officers. You know what the really beautiful part is? They'll never see it coming. Their sensors will detect our transmission, analyze it, determine that it's just random noise, and let it through their defensive filters without a second thought. Because it looks harmless, Commander Vex said, understanding beginning to dawn in his voice. Because it looks average, Zara corrected with a laugh that held no humor whatsoever. Just like me, the timer showed 57 seconds. Her fingers moved across the final sequence of commands. On her screen, a single line of code appeared. To anyone else, it would have looked like meaningless static. But Zara knew better. This was a culmination of 8 seconds of analysis, 5 years of being underestimated, and a lifetime of being forged in the crucible of humanity's most violent world. "Transmission ready," she announced. "Admiral on your command." Kresh looked around at his officers one final time. General THYSS gave him a slight nod. Commander Vex crossed his massive arms and grunted his approval. Even the usually nervous Lieutenant Jax could be heard clearly through the intercom. "Do it, sir. Trust the human." "Captain Chen," Admiral Kresh said formally, "you are authorized to proceed." "Thank you, Admiral," Zara replied. Then, with a grin that will haunt the nightmares of her enemies for generations to come, she added, "Time to show these metalheads why you should never dismiss a Deathworlder." She pressed the transmission key. For exactly 3.7 seconds, nothing happened. The Void Reaper fleet continued its inexorable advance, their weapons charging, their crews preparing for what they believed would be an easy slaughter. Then the universe decided to remind everyone why humans were considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The first sign was a subtle shimmer in the space around the enemy flagship, like heat distortion, but cold and somehow hungry. The shimmer spread outward in a perfect sphere, moving faster than light itself with a quantum-entangled network that connected every Reaper vessel. War Prime Brutus had exactly enough time to say, "What is," before his ship's communication array began to sing. It was a beautiful sound, actually, a harmonic resonance that seemed to come from the very fabric of space itself. Musical and haunting and absolutely, utterly lethal. The flagship was the first to go. Its dark matter hull began to vibrate at a quantum level. The molecular bonds that held it together becoming unstable. For a moment it seemed to stretch into eternity. The massive dreadnought simply hung in space, its hull rippling like water. Then it exploded, but not in flame and fury. Instead, it collapsed into itself, becoming a brief and brilliant star before winking out of existence entirely. The implosion created a gravity well that lasted exactly 1.3 seconds before reality snapped back to normal. The effects spread to the fleet like wildfire. Ship after ship began to sing that same haunting song, their hulls rippling and distorting before collapsing into temporary singularities. The Void Reapers, masters of dark matter technology, had become victims of their own expertise. "Magnificent," General THYSS whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "Absolutely magnificent." The command center of the Eternal Glory was silent, except for the quiet hum of their own systems and the occasional gasp of amazement from various crew members. On the main view screen, 3,000 enemy vessels were disappearing one by one, each death marked by a brief flare of exotic matter before returning to empty space. Commander Vex was staring at his tactical displays in disbelief. "Captain, I'm reading 0 enemy contacts. 0 debris fields. It's like they never existed." "That's because they don't," Zara explained calmly, finally leaning back in her chair. "Quantum implosion doesn't leave wreckage. It leaves nothing but a very brief disruption in local space-time and some confused gravitational waves." Admiral Kresh was quiet for a long moment, his 6 eyes fixed on the empty space where the largest enemy fleet in recorded history had been floating just minutes before. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Captain Chen," he said slowly, "how long did it take you to devise this strategy?" 8 seconds, she replied matter-of-factly. "Right after I heard War Prime Brutus's initial transmission." His voice carried trace quantum signatures from his ship's communication array. "Once I had that, mapping their entire network was just a matter of basic mathematics." "Basic mathematics," Commander Vex repeated slowly. You just eliminated 3,000 warships with basic mathematics. And human ingenuity, Zara added with a shrug. Don't forget the human ingenuity. That's the part that really makes a difference. Lieutenant Jax's voice crackled through the intercom, barely containing his excitement. Captain, I'm receiving transmission requests from 17 different news networks, 43 military commands, and something called the Galactic Strategic Oversight Committee. They all want to know how we destroyed an entire Void Reaper fleet without firing a single shot. Zara stood up from her workstation, stretching muscles that had been tense with concentration for the past several minutes. Tell them, she said with a smile that was equal parts satisfaction and anticipation, that the average human just got creative. She looked around at the assembled officers, meeting each of their gazes in turn. Now, about those transfer requests I mentioned earlier. Admiral Kresh's crystalline exoskeleton clicked rapidly in what could only be described as nervous laughter. Captain, I think we need to discuss a promotion instead. How does the title Chief Strategic Advisor to the Galactic Fleet sound? It sounds, Zara replied thoughtfully, like someone finally figured out that underestimating humans is a mistake you only get to make once. General THYSS uncoiled from her command chair, her serpentine form moving with newfound respect. Captain Chen, I owe you an apology. We all do. No apology necessary, Zara said graciously. You did exactly what I expected you to do. You judged me based on incomplete information and preconceived notions. It's a perfectly natural response. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. But here's the thing about us Deathworlders. We don't just survive because we're strong or fast or clever. We survive because we pay attention. We watch. We learn. And we remember everything. Commander Vex shifted uncomfortably. What do you mean? I mean, Zara said with a smile that somehow managed to be both warm and terrifying, that for the past 6 months, I've been cataloging every tactical weakness, every strategic blind spot, and every exploitable flaw in this fleet's operational doctrine. Not because I was planning to betray anyone, but because paying attention to details is how humans stay alive. The silence that followed was profound. And now, she continued conversationally, I'm going to use that information to help you become the most effective military force in galactic history. Because that's what humans do when you finally decide to trust us. We make everyone around us better. Admiral Kresh clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. And if we hadn't decided to trust you, Zara's smile widened. And for just a moment, every person in that command center got a glimpse of exactly why Earth was classified as a death world. Admiral, she said pleasantly, let's just say it's a very good thing you made the right choice. Lieutenant Jax's voice came through the intercom one final time. Captain, the Galactic Command is requesting immediate debriefing on your tactical methods. They want to know if this technique can be replicated. Tell them, Zara said, settling back into her chair and pulling up a fresh set of tactical displays, that it already has been. I've just finished uploading complete strategic profiles for 17 different enemy factions, including detailed instructions for neutralizing each one using similar methods. She looked around at her fellow officers, her expression shifting from predatory satisfaction to something approaching genuine warmth. Welcome to the future of galactic warfare, everyone, where the most dangerous weapon isn't the biggest gun or the strongest shield. What is it then? General THYSS asked. The mind of a human who's been underestimated for just a little too long, Zara replied. And trust me, the galaxy is about to discover that there are a lot more of us than anyone realized. The view screen flickered to show the vast expanse of space where the Void Reaper fleet had been. Empty now, peaceful, with only the distant stars bearing witness to what had just occurred. In the span of 8 seconds, Captain Zara Chen had analyzed an enemy fleet, identified their weakness, and devised a strategy that turned their greatest strength into their ultimate downfall. In the span of 5 minutes, she had executed that strategy and eliminated the most dangerous threat the galaxy had seen in centuries. But most importantly, in the span of a single conversation, she had transformed from a dismissed, underestimated, average human into something far more dangerous, a recognized and respected Deathworlder. The galaxy would never be the same.